here's a question that we all always get. So I think you've been, I won't call it lucky enough, but I think, you have, I think an amazing opportunity to work both in OEMs and also startups, right?
That's correct. Yes.
So in one place, you have to do all of it, and another, like in a startup, whereas in an OEM, it's highly structured, highly process oriented, right?
That's correct.
So,
Yeah.
most of the students that have joined us today, right, they're pursuing career programs in
Right.
Crashworthiness. They're putting in a lot of effort, right?
Sure.
So one of
I
the
understand.
things, that they always ask is, when they are looking for opportunities, and these are, really young professionals. Most of the average would be, say, 23 to 24 years old. So really young guys.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
when they are trying to pursue a career
Yeah.
in automotive industry, so what would you recommend, startup or OEMs?
I would say startup is because that's where you would get to learn pretty much, you'll get the full flavor of this analysis field. Because in big companies like GM or Ford, where I work, there is segregated teams for doing a certain kind of work, and an engineer doesn't get the full flavor of it. But startups, what happens is, like, first of all, the capital is limited, so the number of resources are limited. So based on that, in the analysis engineer will have to do pretty much every task. So he gets to understand what goes on in each and every step, and so he'll get the full understanding and um, full appreciation for end-to-end work when he does that. So that's what I would recommend, to go from a
Absolutely.
small company. Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And see,
Mhm.
there is one other question that I wanted to ask with respect to that. See, from a thought process point of view, obviously,
Mhm.
startups pay less, right?
Mhm.
And then OEMs or tier one suppliers, I think the initial pay is a lot. But
Mhm.
then, what would your advice be? Like, if I were to say it, I would basically say that, when you're trying to learn,
Mhm.
don't focus a lot on what you're being paid, because if you are able to do A to Z in any task,
Yeah.
3 4 years down the line, you're going to be extremely valuable. But what is your take on that?
No, I definitely would agree with what you say, Sarang, because that's my take too. Because if it doesn't matter if you get the pay less, as long as you're able to get that kind of an experience, I mean, 4 years down the lane, you will be actually be worth more than what a guy who joined like a big OEM would be making, because
Absolutely.
your skill set will be that much more marketable.
Makes sense. Thank you so much for that, Vedant.
Sure.
So the first question is from Hisham, Hisham Amer. First, he thanks you for taking your time to do this, and
Mhm.
he's really fascinated about getting into a startup in India, right?
Okay.
And
Mhm.
he essentially is saying that, hey, do you have any strategy in mind so that I can find the right companies and and get some type of work in those startups? What would you say for that?
I mean, you basically, in these kind of companies, you have to have somebody on the inside, which most of the time doesn't happen. I understand, but then what I would suggest is show your skill sets, because a lot of OEMs, I mean, even startups are looking for like this people with the skill set, because that's what matters to them, and then who can turn around jobs really quick. That's one thing. I mean, a lot of my managers would appreciate was like they would throw me some work and I would turn it around in the lesser time than what I
Yeah.
mentioned, which is kind of like this thing for the managers too, because they have deadlines they have to meet. So if we can help them out, they always will like that. So yeah.
See, I couldn't agree with you more, because one of the
Mhm.
things that we tell all the students is that, you're not getting a job because because it's a learning opportunity for you. You're
Mhm.
getting a job because you are helping the company, get their work done in a fast manner.
Yeah.
So essentially, you should always look at what value that you are going to add to the company instead of what
Right.
value they are going to be adding, because why would they pay you
Yeah.
for, right? The other question, and this is kind of a two-part question, so what we can do is we can take it step by step, but I'll tell you
Sure.
what the question is completely.
Okay.
So we would, I think most of the students here understand what vehicle crashworthiness is because they're currently taking programs at Skilllink.
Right.
The thing that might not be very clear for them is, what's the current state of crashworthiness? Meaning, say
Mhm.
that there's a person who's running the entire team there, right? what are their objectives? Like, why is it that they're doing this? And then depending upon, which country you are in, if you're working for the OEM or if you're working for their subsidiary in India, right? How does the work profile change?
Okay. So like the first part would be like, you want me to answer the current trends? I
Right.
can go. So in US, the current trend is all about battery electric vehicles, and battery electric vehicles is a totally different animal compared to IC engines, because from IC engines, the concentration was always on the frontal crash and not on the side, because the front had the most weight. Your engine, your transmission, everything came up in the front, and to keep the occupant safe, people concentrated more on the frontal crash analysis part. But for battery electric vehicles, the shift has gone to the side, because side becomes more what would I say, severe case for a battery electric vehicle, because the most of the vehicles nowadays, the design is the battery goes to the bottom of the passengers, and there is no more room. So in a side crash event, there is not much give.
Yep.
So how to make it safe? Because I think the allowed intrusion is like somewhere around 35 millimeter, and by 35 millimeter, you need to end the whole crash simulation. So that's a lot of force to be accounted for in such a small distance, right? So that's the current trend where everybody is like working on battery electric vehicles, and mostly aluminum, because electric vehicles, if they have the mass less, they can increase the range. So they trying to reduce the vehicle structure mass itself. So they're switching to aluminum. So a lot of work is being going on in aluminum. The joineries are totally different from steel. So like a lot of development in that is going on. Another this thing is trend is shrinking timelines, right? That's always another challenge, because all the OEMs and all the companies, like even Tesla's, they want to shrink their timelines because they want to be able to get new vehicles on the road. So they want to shrink the timelines. I can give you an example, like Model 3, from the start to finish, they took less than a year.
Wow.
They were so confident in their analysis capabilities that they even skipped soft tooling. So usual cycle is you go from design, then you go to soft tooling, and then once you're like 100% satisfied with soft tooling, you go to hard tooling, right? They totally skipped soft tooling and they went to hard tooling, and the whole vehicle was ready in less than a year's time frame, which is like kind of unheard of, right?
Vedant,
For
so
a
I had a couple of questions here. So, when you're saying that, they had models that they were so confident that they can skip actually the soft tooling part, right? So it makes me wonder. So, traditionally, at least even now it's being done, there's a lot of experimental tests. At the end of the day, they are going to give you the most accurate results, correct? But
Yeah,
we all know that experimental testing is extremely costly, right? You kind of have to do it for each and every model, and even
right.
for whenever you revise a model, you have to do it. Whenever there's a new car, you have to do it,
Yes,
right?
exactly. That's
So
a regulation based. Yeah.
exactly, that's a regulation. You cannot get around it. But then,
Yes.
you know, obviously, building a prototype with completely relying on experimental testing, which was the trend several years back, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So if you compare, say, 20, 25 years back versus today, right, where
Yes.
computational techniques have evolved so much, computing power has evolved so much as well.
Right. Exactly.
What do
Yeah.
you think, in your opinion, is the cost saving for a company for a single model, right? So if I'm releasing, say, Model 3, let's talk about Model 3. Say Model 3 released in 2020 versus Model 3 released in 2000, early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
How much cost has been saved in, say, getting a single vehicle out because of the advent of computational tools and computing power?
I mean, I would say in the order of millions of dollars. Like, it's a lot of money saved, because, I mean, just one single round of testing, you would be destroying at least like 20 vehicles. And if it's an high-end vehicle, like Karma's were, like think about it, it's like $130,000 per car,
So
like you're
2.6
burning through.
million.
Yeah. So just one round.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a lot of money saved. I mean, that's the beauty of what we do in crash analysis. Like once you have those initial baseline setup, like what Tesla did, I'm talking about, like where you would understand the capabilities of your model, you can blindly go skipping all the testing and soft tooling and go to direct testing, uh, where you're like confident that it's going to perform the way it's supposed to perform. So
Got it. Thank you so much. Diving a bit deeper.
no
So,
problem.
at the end of the day, you have this computational model which is going to give
Mhm.
you all the results that a real crash test would give, correct?
Exactly.
So,
Yes.
we know that most of the students here know that, when you look at it from a bird's eye viewpoint, there
Hmm.
is, you're building the model. So you have to have an accurate geometry, and
Hmm.
then that's converted to an FE model.
Hmm.
And then once that FE model is available, you make sure that you provide properties or attributes to the
Hmm.
model and also the load setups, right? So
Yes.
essentially making sure that you're simulating something that would actually happen in real life. And then you
Exactly.
would
Yes.
look at the final results, correct?
Hmm. Yes.
Now, apart from whatever I said right now, do you
Hmm.
think that are there any key pieces that are actually done in the industry that are typically not known to students? Or do you feel like these are the three main steps?
Yeah, I mean, these are the main steps what you talked about, but then there are some small missing pieces. Is like fine tuning of materials, which is like the biggest impact in a crash analysis. I mean, I can give you various examples. Like we had assumed a kind of material property um, for a like a bumper beam. Like I can give you this example. Like one of the previous projects what I worked on. So the bumper beam in our crash analysis performed beautifully, but when we went to the testing, that whole thing sheared off, and the results were like totally off, right? And then we pull up the material properties, we did the material testing ourselves, and then compared to what we had as material properties, and it was totally different.
So can you talk a little bit about what were the material properties that you assumed and then you found it to be different?
Yeah, so the grade of aluminum, what we were assuming was in the physical part was uh, more ductile. That means basically when the
Interesting.
crash event happens, it will absorb the energy and it'll get an accordion crush. But then what was actually supplied by the supplier was a brittle material. So as soon as it
Interesting.
saw the wall, it's just shattered into million pieces. There was no crush event at all.
So Vedant, how does something like that happen? Because when you do the final prototyping, your bomb is super accurate, right? It should be super accurate, correct?
Yeah.
But then, like, why do you think there was a miss? Because I'm assuming you guys set up the material properties based upon the bill of materials, correct?
No, so it's these are all material properties we're getting from supplier, because the supplier
Okay,
says, "Oh, this is the material we're going to use for this vehicle," and then what happens is supplier runs out of the material or something, and then he switches us without telling us that he switched the
interesting.
material.
Okay.
So there's some scenarios like that can happen. I mean, there are different teams which have to maintain all this, but yeah, it kind of got skipped. Like somebody dropped the ball somewhere, and this is what we found out when we did the crash analysis. So
No, that
yeah,
was
that's
actually
the
very,
thing.
very interesting. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
So, if you take a look at the work profile of a crash worthiness engineer in India,
Hmm.
right? Like, do you feel like there is some limitation in the amount of work that is actually done by Indian crash worthiness professionals,
Hmm.
or if is the scope slightly different? Can you just talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so I've worked with GM in the headquarters over here in Michigan, right? And then I've seen folks who worked with GMTCI Bangalore. We have worked closely with them. And one thing I've noticed on and off is a lot of the folks are kind of like stipulated to one field. Like I've known some people who do meshing, are always doing meshing for a bit, and then once they have done that experience, that's when they get moved to doing the like the basic analysis work. They start getting introduced to like setting up the model or doing some analysis work, and then later they get moved to doing the full-fledged analysis work. So that's something what I've noticed. But in US, what I've noticed is it's totally different. From get-go, you're thrown into the deep end. You're being given the model to build and then do the analysis. I mean, if you're in a startup environment, that's how it's going to be. You don't have any people to help you out. You have to learn everything on the fly, or you must have experience before to even swim in that situation.
See, especially the things that you talked about, with respect to testing, you said that, okay, the supplier, there was a material mismatch from the supplier, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So, and then you guys did the testing on your own, right? Do you
Yes.
feel like that exposure is available in any of the Indian companies? In India.
Right. I'm not 100% sure about that, but then I'm assuming it should be there, because only reason being, like, only then you can be accurate about what you do, right? Like your crash analysis, because material is number one thing, like for especially crash,
Absolutely.
because otherwise it's going to be garbage in, garbage out. So yeah, I mean, material is one example. Like the other next most important things is connections, right? So a lot of work is in US has been going on is to define the connections properly, because when we switch to aluminum, the connection pattern is different.
Right.
It's not no more spot weld. You have to use like special joineries, like for it's called as it's not spot welds, but I draw a blank right now. But yeah, there are like different multiple connections what we use in aluminum, and then there is no data for it. So you have to create samples, do the tensile testing by yourself, and define those in your models. Otherwise, you're going to be like I said, it's garbage in, garbage out.
Makes sense. So Vedant, that actually brings an interesting point. See, for example, if a car manufacturer is actually making cars in India and is relying upon suppliers in India, then then is it correct to say that most of the material testing that the Indian supplier provides is actually done in India, or does it actually is that actually being done in the US or wherever the headquarters is?
Testing, it's mostly wherever the headquarters is, because that's where they have all the equipment and testing facilities. That's why.
Okay, so to kind of give a summary to the summary to the audience, and correct me if I'm if I'm saying anything wrong here.
Sure.
Especially if you take the current automotive scenario, given that the major automotive companies are still in the US, right? From a crash worthiness point of view, the scope of work is way more detailed for crash worthiness engineers in those countries. Whereas in India, you might still get into crash worthiness, but your scope of work might be very, very limited. So would you agree to that?
Yeah, kind of.
Got
I mean,
it.
that's the trend I've seen. Yeah. So right now, the US market is pretty hot right now with respect to EV market. A lot of companies are starting up over here and then working towards electrification. Nevertheless, Europe also, there is a lot of demand and a lot of push, because I think the European regulations have mandated that by a certain date, all the vehicles have to be electrified. So that's the big jump right now with companies like Volkswagen and even BMW to start programs which are all electric. I think BMW, they said by 2035 or 2030 they will be fully electric. So yeah, one point you talked about was like you were talking about autonomous vehicle and automation, right? So autonomous vehicle is another animal which is coming up for crash engineers, is because autonomous vehicles, what's happening is the traditional seating arrangement what you have in a car is changing. So before, everybody used to face forward. Now we have occupants who are facing back, and then other occupants who are facing forward. Now, how do you attach a seat belt to an occupant who has a swivel seat, right? And then where do you attach an airbag for an occupant who has a swivel seat? So these are all the new challenges that are coming up for crash engineers. So things are going to be interesting. And automation point of view, like I said, pre-processing, I would say It's not there yet. There is a lot of scope there for it. But post-processing, definitely there is a lot of automation. People write their own scripts to create the results, post-processor results. And companies nowadays have that as a standard because they want everybody's report to look the same. So they already have all these pre-processor scripts in which all the employees use to make standard reports.
And Vedant, is Python used a lot in this space?
Yes, Python. Yes, Python scripting. Yes.
Great, awesome.